It happened on a Tuesday, 9:14 a.m. to be exact. I'd barely finished my first cup of coffee when I saw the calendar invite pop up. Urgent, join conference room B, mandatory. No subject line, no context. The kind of message that arrives like a bad omen. I clicked it open, heart ticking a little faster, and almost laughed at the irony sent by Dan, my manager, who hadn't responded to a single one of my strategy memos in 2 months. Still, I closed my laptop, smoothed the wrinkles in my blazer, and walked across the open floor plan toward the glass-walled conference room. Everyone saw me go. They always do when something's about to happen, especially when it smells like blood. When I opened the door, I knew. The HR director was already seated. Dan was standing, not in his usual half-casual pose, but rigid, fake-friendly. Palms pressed to the back of a chair like it was the only thing keeping him upright. "Thanks for coming," he said. There was no how are you? Just that. I sat down slowly. HR cleared her throat. Dan started with the usual script. "We appreciate your efforts. Unfortunately, tough decisions, organizational alignment, not a reflection of your value as a person." It was like watching a rerun of a bad drama I didn't audition for. I didn't interrupt, didn't ask for clarification. I let him finish every manufactured syllable while my chest burned with something heavier than anger clarity. Because this wasn't about performance, this was about control, about scapegoating, about trimming the headcount before the quarterly report. They said I was being let go, effective immediately. I was to collect my things and leave the building before noon, in front of the whole office. No dignity, no warning, just gone. I nodded once. Not in agreement, but in understanding. I knew the game now. When I stood to leave, Dan wouldn't meet my eyes. HR offered a stiff smile. I walked out with my head high, past desks that suddenly went silent, eyes glued to monitors pretending not to look. No one said goodbye. No one stood up. But it didn't matter, because they thought they were watching the end of something. They had no idea. Tomorrow, I'd be back, and they'd be calling me boss. Long before they fired me in front of the entire office, they made sure I felt invisible. It didn't start with shouting or formal reprimands. It started quietly, strategically. Ideas I pitched in meetings would vanish into the void until someone else brought them up a week later. And suddenly, they were brilliant. I'd write reports. Dan would slap his name on them. I'd stay late solving client escalations no one else would touch. The next day, he'd get thanked in the morning stand-up, and I'd get a half glance and a fresh pile of urgent busy work. At first, I tried harder, worked weekends, smiled through it, thought maybe I wasn't communicating clearly. Maybe I wasn't being assertive enough. Classic gaslighting, internal and external. Then the promotions started skipping over me. One after another, people I trained became my managers. I spoke up once, asked Dan carefully what I could do to be considered for advancement. He smiled and said, "You're solid, but not exactly leadership material. You're great with execution, though. Keep doing what you do best." That was the moment something cracked. Because I realized I was never going to be seen here not for what I actually brought to the table, just for how quietly I cleaned up everyone else's messes. It wasn't a lack of talent. It was a system built to keep people like me in a corner. I started documenting everything after that. Every task, every transfer, every time I was asked to present a project but not invited to the table where decisions were made. While they boxed me out, I was laying groundwork. Late nights weren't just for catching up on work anymore. They were for building something of my own, researching, learning, reaching out to founders, sketching out a business plan I hadn't yet dared to believe I'd ever need. I didn't know when I'd use it, but I knew the day was coming. Because places like this don't implode. They rot. From the inside, slowly, under the weight of people who are too comfortable calling exploitation efficiency and too cowardly to say it out loud. So when the end finally came, it didn't surprise me. What surprised them was how calm I was when it happened, because the game they thought they were ending had already taken elsewhere, and it was about to eat them alive. They gave me a cardboard box. Not even a bag. Just a box, the kind you usually see in sitcoms after the punchline lands and the lights fade. Mine had 3 pens, a framed photo, 1 dying desk plant, and a mug that said, "Get shut done." I left the mug behind. Packing up felt surreal. Everyone kept their heads down. Some typed a little louder than necessary. One guy, the intern I helped land the role, gave me a guilty glance but didn't say a word. I couldn't blame him. Silence was safer in that office. Everyone knew it. Dan never showed up again after the firing. HR did the escort. She stood by the elevator like I was a shoplifter, waiting to make sure I didn't download trade secrets on the way out. I wanted to laugh, as if the most valuable thing in this place was still on a server. The elevator ride down felt like exhale and fire all at once. I didn't cry. I didn't break down. But the weight of it hit in waves, years of building, only to be erased in less than 9 minutes. What stung most wasn't the firing. It was that they did it like I'd never mattered. No exit interview, no acknowledgement, no chance to speak. They cut me out like bad code, forgetting I was the one who kept the system running long after the leads lost the plot. But I wasn't angry, not in the loud screaming way. I was angry in the focused way. The kind of anger that doesn't burn out, it builds. By the time I stepped out onto the sidewalk, box in hand, sun in my eyes, I was already thinking about what came next. Not revenge, not a pity party, a reckoning. They thought they were done with me. But what they didn't know, what no one in that building knew, was that the deal I'd been working on quietly for 6 months had just cleared legal, a merger, a buyout. And by noon tomorrow, the company that threw me out like expired inventory would be under new ownership. And I wouldn't be walking back in as an employee. I'd be walking in as the CEO of the company that now controlled theirs. While they were busy calling me non-essential, I was quietly building something they never saw coming. 6 months earlier, I'd gone to lunch with an old mentor, someone who'd left corporate life and built a lean, aggressive consulting firm that specialized in distressed acquisitions. Over drinks and a half-eaten salad, he asked how work was going. I told him the truth. He didn't flinch, just leaned back and said, "What if you stopped trying to survive their system and bought it instead?" I laughed at first. Then I didn't. The idea stuck, because I knew the ins and outs of that place better than anyone. The skeletons, the inefficiencies, the bloated middle management layers that killed innovation while protecting egos. I knew their blind spots because I'd been buried under them. My mentor and I started drawing up a plan. We pulled data, researched competitors, identified market gaps. By the 3rd meeting, he'd looped in his private equity partners. By the 5th, we had an informal term sheet, and within 2 months, we had a viable path forward to acquire my old company through his firm, with me as the operational lead and successor CEO. I never leaked a word. I kept clocking in, kept working quietly, kept watching the company trip over its own culture of arrogance. And as fate would have it, their board had already been quietly looking to sell. Declining profit margins, client churn, leadership stagnation. All it needed was a serious buyer, one with insider knowledge, one who could gut the rot and make the whole thing profitable again. I was the scalpel they didn't know they needed. So when Dan fired me, he was doing me a favor. He freed me from my NDA, from their systems, from any internal politics. I signed the acquisition documents the morning after I got let go, not with bitterness, but with full clarity. By noon, the deal was announced internally to the acquiring firm's stakeholders. By 3, the email hit their leadership team. By 5, the calendar invite went out. 9:00 a.m., acquisition welcome briefing, all staff required. Dan got it. HR got it. Everyone who'd watched me pack my things got it. What they didn't know until they stepped into that meeting was that I wouldn't be joining as a strategic advisor or integration lead. I'd be at the head of the table, wearing the title they told me I'd never deserve. 9:00 a.m., exactly 24 hours after they fired me. This time, I didn't take the elevator like I used to. I took the private entrance, one I now had access to through the parent company's executive badge. The receptionist saw me first. Her eyes went wide. Her mouth opened slightly, but she said nothing. Just watched as I walked past her desk without stopping. My heels echoed on the polished tile. Same floor I used to shuffle through with earbuds in, half forgotten by the people I worked hardest for. Not today. Today, every step was deliberate. Every stare met with calm precision. I was wearing black, tailored suit, hair pulled back, no jewelry except the silver watch Julian gave me when the deal closed, engraved on the inside build. Don't beg. The same co-workers who avoided eye contact yesterday were now peeking over cubicles, trying to confirm what they were seeing. Some stiffened in their chairs. A few straightened their postures like they were about to be evaluated. I walked straight to conference room B. Same room I was fired in. Only this time, the nameplate on the door read, "Reserved, Executive Briefing." Inside, the new legal team was already waiting. So was my mentor, now chairman of the board. He stood when I entered. "Morning, CEO," he said, and handed me the finalized personnel file. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I simply nodded and took my seat at the head of the table. At 9:05, the door opened. Dan entered first. He stopped mid-step when he saw me. Behind him came HR, then 3 department leads, all wide-eyed, all whispering. The room filled with the same people who had erased me from decision-making circles, belittled my input, and watched silently as I was shown the door. They took their seats slowly. My mentor stood. Let's begin. He ran through the basics: acquisition finalized, leadership shift effective immediately, operational restructure incoming. Then he gestured toward me. "I'd like to introduce the new Chief Executive Officer for this division, someone who knows this company better than most, and who we believe will turn it around faster than anyone else." He looked right at me, and the room fell so quiet you could hear Dan's pride snap. "Please welcome back, Eva Nguyen." I stood, looked across the room, and said 4 words. "Good to see everyone." For a second, no one spoke. You could hear the faint hum of the HVAC and someone's pen nervously clicking. Dan looked like someone had hit him with a corporate ghost. HR blinked twice, like maybe she misheard. I didn't repeat myself. I didn't need to. My name was already printed at the top of the new org chart projected on the screen behind me. Eva Nguyen, Chief Executive Officer, Division 3, formerly Alarix Consulting. I waited a beat, then took my seat and gestured for the meeting to continue. The new head of legal walked the team through the structural changes, streamlining departments, reallocating budgets, sunsetting legacy tools that were hemorrhaging cash. None of this was news to me. I'd helped draft the plan. But the real moment came when someone in the back, someone who hadn't said a word, the entire meeting, raised their hand. "So, does this mean Dan reports to you now?" I turned to face the question directly. It means Dan's role is currently under review, like every senior leadership position. I didn't look at Dan, but I felt him look at me. His ears were red. HR coughed into her hand and scribbled something down that looked suspiciously like a resignation draft. The room stayed quiet. Most weren't sure what they were supposed to do. Clap, congratulate me. Pretend nothing happened. The rules had changed overnight, and nobody had gotten the new script. So I gave them one. I stood again and spoke clearly, deliberately. I know yesterday was a surprise for many of you. Trust me, it was for me too. But today isn't about retribution. It's about recalibration. The version of this company you've known is over. We're here to rebuild something leaner, smarter, and more human. I paused. And to be clear, I didn't come back to make anyone uncomfortable. But I also didn't come back to make anyone comfortable if they were part of the problem. Another pause. Fairness, accountability. That's what I expect from every level moving forward. Starting now. That's when it happened. Someone clapped. Then another. Not the performative kind, not slow or ironic, just a few firm, measured claps that grew into something real. Not everyone joined in, but enough did. Dan stayed quiet. I gave them one final nod. We'll begin one-on-ones this week. My door will be open. For the right reasons. And with that, I adjourned the meeting. As they filed out, some stunned, some impressed, some scared, I remained seated, letting it all settle, letting the silence do what words never could. I didn't need revenge speeches. I didn't need dramatic showdowns. I had the title. I had the power. And finally, I had the floor. Dan requested a private meeting before noon. He didn't go through my assistant. He just appeared outside my new office like he always used to, entitled, impatient, uninvited. I let him wait 5 minutes before I opened the door. He stepped in and did a double take. My office now had real light, clean lines, no more cubicle gray, a glass desk, 2 chairs, and a view of the skyline that looked nothing like the one I used to stare at from behind his shadow. He tried to smile. I didn't return it. "So," he began, adjusting his sleeves. "I guess congrats are in order?" I nodded. "I guess so." He sat without being asked. Classic Dan. "I'll admit I didn't see this coming," he said. "But listen, I think we can both agree, emotions aside, it's probably best to keep the past in the past." I raised an eyebrow. "The past where you fired me in front of the whole team with no warning." He paused. "It wasn't personal. You know how these things work. Restructuring. Pressure from upstairs." I kept my face still. "There was no restructuring order. You made the call solo." He opened his mouth, then shut it. "I'm not here to rehash it. Dan," I said, "I just want to be clear this isn't a grudge play, but I also don't reward cowardice." He stiffened. "Cowardice. You had every chance to support my work. Instead, you took credit. You erased me from strategy meetings. You silenced my progress and called it team alignment." He leaned back, mask cracking. "I didn't know you were building a case." I said, "I was building a future, and you never bothered to ask where I was going." A long silence followed. "Finally," he said, "so what happens now?" I looked him in the eye. "You're stepping down. You'll get your severance. Clean transition. No drama. But your leadership ends today." He blinked, clearly expecting a fight or a second chance. "I gave you years," I said, standing. "You gave me 9 minutes." Dan rose slowly. "You're really going to do this?" I opened the door. I already did. He left without another word. No slam, no tantrum, just quiet footsteps echoing out of relevance. And as I sat back down, the corner of my mouth lifted not in satisfaction, but in peace. It wasn't revenge. It was justice done quietly. 3 weeks later, the office didn't just look different. It felt different. The fake energy was gone. The performative small talk, the fear that hung in the air like bad perfume evaporated, replaced by something rarer, honesty. I made rounds every morning, not to check in like a micromanager, but to be visible, present, real. I stopped by the junior analyst pod and asked what tools slowed them down. I visited the design team and asked who never got credit on presentations. I listened, took notes, followed through. Word spread quickly that I didn't care about title inflation, that I read every single anonymous survey, that I sat in on entry-level onboarding and asked new hires what made them hesitate to speak up. They told me stories, how they were once silenced in meetings, how their ideas got funneled through louder voices, how they had learned to survive but not contribute. I didn't make speeches about changing the culture. I just started doing it. I replaced 2 middle managers who spent more time gatekeeping than guiding, promoted a soft-spoken project lead who'd been consistently passed over despite delivering everything on time. Every time. I doubled the budget for mentorship, canceled 2 useless reporting systems that served no one but Dan's ego. And when I walked the halls, people didn't flinch anymore. They nodded, stopped me, told me what they needed. They weren't afraid of losing their jobs for speaking up, because they'd already seen the worst and they watched me survive it. More than that, they saw me rebuild from it. That's what I wanted this company to be, not just profitable, not just competitive, human. A place where no one had to make themselves small to keep their job. A place where a desk near the copier didn't mean your ideas were disposable. A place where the quiet ones didn't get cut. They got heard. And as I stood one evening by the glass overlooking the city, lights blinking far below, I realized I didn't just return to the company that discarded me. I rewrote its legacy, not with revenge, with clarity, with culture, with power that no one gave me but I claimed anyway, because I earned it. And this time, no one could take it back.